Welcome back to another edition of the Friday Golf Podcast. I am your host, Andy Johnson, and today I have a podcast for you. It is about Jordan Spieth, as the title may suggest. We've done a couple of these podcasts over the last few months. Garrett and Shane Ryan did one on Rory McIlroy after the U.S. Open. Where does he go from here? I did one with Joseph LaMagna on Justin Thomas, and today I am joined by founder of Normal Sport, the Normal Sport newsletter, something worth subscribing to, Kyle Porter, as well as Joseph LaMagna, and we're going to talk in detail about Jordan Spieth. It was fun going back and looking at his career. You kind of forget a little bit all of the success and the records, how great his early career was, like historically great early career. And I think coming off this wrist injury, we're kind of at a crossroads. So I'm excited to jump into that. Before we get into this pod, let's talk about our friends at the USGA. With the USGA's GS3 ball, there's never been a better time to invest in the quality of your playing surfaces. Thanks to the GS3, golf courses can now instantly measure a green's speed, firmness, smoothness, and trueness. Just by dropping and rolling, the data automatically flows into the Deacon management system, which enables you to set targets and monitor playing conditions using the performance charts in Deacon mobile app or desktop. To learn more about the GS3, visit gsshop.usga.org/GS3-ball. That's gsshop.usga.org/GS3-ball. All right, let's get to our pod with Kyle Porter and Joseph LaMagna. All right, today's topic. I am joined by Kyle Porter and Joseph LaMagna. Today's topic is none other than Jordan Spieth, the Golden Boy, who may have lost a little bit of his shine in recent years. Just he's not really a boy anymore, too. What do they turn? Does he turn into the Golden Man?
Well, I gotta jump in. Is it the Golden Child or the Golden Boy? Because we have gold. We also have Gold Boy, which is confusing.
Well, Gold Boy, I don't know where Gold Boy is these days.
That's also true.
He's somewhere buried in the basement of the global home.
Maybe just like the chosen one or something. I don't know.
It's anyways, I open this up for discussion. This is one of the more wild career arcs we've had in modern professional golf. And I think he's 31 years old. It's a fascinating time in the Spieth career. Obviously, at the end of this year, he had and throughout the year, a wrist injury that greatly hampered his ability to play golf and with pain-free. And he is now reporting pain-free in the wrist, and 2025 is right on the corner. So as you guys looked through the career, was there a favorite moment that you pulled out?
Go ahead, Kyle. I know you got you. It's probably hard for you to narrow it down to one, but go ahead.
There's so many. I think people always think about the Masters with Spieth, right? And I think that's pretty obvious. He's competed in or contended for 4 or 5, like legitimately contended for 4 or 5 of them. The one that I go back to though always is Birkdale. It's 2017 at Birkdale, and I think that Spieth has been an even better Open player than he's been a Masters player, and his like the whole 30-minute hole. I can't remember what number it was, 12 or 13 or whatever it was, and then he falls back with Kuchar, and then Kuchar plays the rest of the way 1 under, like the last whatever it was 6 holes. I think he plays 1 under. And he gets steamrolled by Spieth. And I thought that year and that maybe even that event was really Spieth at his kind of apex in terms of like all his skills working together, and we'll get more into that later on. But that to me really stands out if I look at the entire Jordan Spieth arc.
It's funny you mentioned that one, Kyle. I went back and rewatched the final round at Birkdale in preparation for this pod, and Spieth, so he hits that wild tee shot on 13, and honestly, going back and rewatching it, maybe a questionable drop on if it was actually back on a straight line onto the driving range.
I think definitely.
I just didn't remember it as much. It looked like it was really pushing it. He plays his last 5 holes 5 under. And that part I don't remember as much. Like he sticks the approach shot on 14, a par 3,
he almost made it.
He almost made it. And then Eagles 15. It's unbelievable. Boat races Kuchar coming in. That one really stands out to me. And then the other thing is 2015, how involved he was in every single major. It's just unbelievable at that age that we had a player who had a legitimate chance of winning all 4. So I think, Andy, those are the ones that stand out for me.
I wrote down 2015. Like, this is the closest we've seen to the career or to the Grand Slam in a year. You know, one shot out of the playoff at St. Andrews, and then you had this epic duel with Jason Day at the PGA, where it was like 2 guys could win the tournament. They were trading blows. That was a like underrated great tournament at Whistling Straits. With regards to Birkdale, Kyle, I completely agree. Like, in terms of like if you broke down like the way Jordan Spieth, the dominance of Jordan Spieth in his early 20s was like this chaotic masterpiece. Right? Like everything was in question. Like everything was in the realm of possibility. Like you could see just a complete foul ball off the tee, a wonky approach shot, but at the end of the day, like the thing that like you had to say about him was like, and I think like this was like so evidently clear when he played with Rory McIlroy at the Masters that one year.
16.
Like he just knows how to get the ball in the hole.
Yeah.
Like he just has this innate ability to just like score.
Yeah.
For me, I go back to the AT&T National in 2013, and this was a couple years before I was in golf. And at the time, I just was playing golf. I watched a lot of golf, and I remember watching golf on like Friday afternoon, and Jordan Spieth at the time was 19. He was playing on a sponsor's exemption, and like he shot like I think he shot 66, and he, you know, and it's like you're watching this kid, and it's just like, God, this kid is good. And at the time, like outside of Tiger, we hadn't seen like these like teen prodigies, you know, and this youth wave. Like Jordan Spieth to me is kind of at the forefront of this youth wave. He was really like the first one. Cantlay, you could argue before he had his injuries, might have been the first one, but Jordan Spieth is just this teen sensation. And I remember watching it and just being like, God, this is so different. And that tournament and that summer, obviously he missed Q School. Him and Brooks Koepka actually were at the same site. You guys know what site they missed at second stage? Did you find this?
Did not find this.
What course got him?
I don't know.
Craig Ranch, TPC Craig Ranch.
Hey, I hate that.
What do you shoot? 20 under and miss out?
Yeah, something. Both of them were like, I couldn't putt into the ocean. I couldn't hit a putt in the ocean. And it's like, well, maybe that is like the ultimate sign that the course is just a putting contest. And it's a bad test of golf is that in Q School, both of there's an article on PGAtour.com where they talk about it, and both of their individual quotes are like, yeah, I couldn't hit a putt into an ocean that week. And it's like these two generational talents missed out because they can't putt. It was like, I think Brooks was like, I hit it great, just couldn't putt. It was like, if the course doesn't allow you to just hit it great and putt, you know, average and get out, it might have a little bit of lack of teeth. But But to me, that tournament, you watched it and it was like, God, this kid has got something different. And then, sure enough, he wins a couple weeks later at the Deer Run, and ends up making it deep into the FedEx Cup playoffs and gets a spot on the President's Cup team, and it's like kind of off to the races from there.
I think what was so interesting about that sort of time period, I remember talking to people that were kind of close to it that were like, gosh, is he good? Like, because you watch him. I mean, you're right, Andy. Like, you watch him in this, what has become what I kind of call like the TrackMan era of guys who have these like manufactured swings out of a laboratory that are beautiful and like perfect and whatever. You watch him and it's like this chicken wing thing. It never looks good. I don't know what the NBA, there's probably an NBA comp, Joseph, where you're like, this doesn't look good, but he's putting up like 27 a night every night and it's pretty efficient, right? And
I feel like the early SGA, everybody's like, God, and it's just like the herky jerkiness of SGA.
Like Clippers SGA?
No, like early Thunder when he started, everybody's like, is he really like one of the 10 best players in the league?
Yeah. Okay, that's good. Do you have a different comp, Joseph?
No, I actually like that comp, but maybe I don't want to jump ahead too much. But I think what's interesting that since you're saying that, Kyle, one thing that really stands out to me with Spieth, kind of a theory I've had about his entire career, is that the game has changed an enormous amount since 2013, 2015 to now. And I think Spieth's game does not hold up to the TrackMan era. In the way that things have gotten so optimized, Jordan Spieth was always a player who's been making mistakes, and that's largely been carved out of the game due to TrackMan, course management, all of the above. So when you go back and think about, well, other players were making mistakes too. Spieth has some weird data anomalies happening in that era. He was making 25% of his putts from 15 to 25 feet, like far and away the best putter from that range. It was such a bizarre skill set that when I look at this, I think a lot of things are true, but it's almost like an NBA player who came into the league in like 2015, 16 was really good from the mid range. And then that kind of got carved out of the league over the next 10 years. Like, I kind of think Spieth's game just doesn't suit the modern era particularly.
DeMar DeRozan.
But
I mean, it's not unreasonable.
So Joseph, you said a couple of different things in there that I think you're like they play into the same thing, but they're very separate to me. One is Spieth's swing and swing speed, which I think have always been kind of average to above average, and the other is this course management, which has obviously been pilloried on Twitter and elsewhere, and has always been average to below average. So do you feel like one of those plays more into kind of what you're talking about with what I hear you saying is Spieth has regressed to kind of his mean over the years? Do you feel like one of those has played more into that than the other?
I think it's both, maybe a little bit of Spieth regressing, but I think the overall baseline in professional golf has just gotten a lot higher around him to where he can't get away with those mistakes. But to your question, I think the course management and the big misses is largely responsible here. Like, I was watching the 2014 final round of the Masters for this, and he's in the final round with Bubba. I don't know if either of you went back and watched this. Like, Jordan's hitting 3-wood off the tee on number 8. And that's just something you don't see anybody doing now. He ends up bogeying number 8, and that's where he gives up his lead to Bubba. Then he bogeys number 9 as well, and Bubba's up by 2 after Bubba birdies number 9. And the rest is kind of history in that event. I just think in general, there was more of a margin for error in that era when a lot of golfers weren't optimized. Jordan's trying to hit these different shots, trying to curve the ball and having these big misses, but other guys are kind of doing that too. Now that doesn't exist, right? Like, you watch Scottie Scheffler and the way he plays, Spieth has to get so hot with the putter or be so much more talented than other golfers to overcome that. And I just don't think he's not the ball striker he was back then. Plus other guys are like Scheffler, and they're not making those mistakes. So I just think it's a really uphill battle for Spieth to get in the mix at the highest level of professional golf in 2024, 2025 and onward.
Speaking to that, I mean, I kind of look at Jordan Spieth, and I think, like, we can't know, like, I think he had a hand injury that I forgot about. And now he had the wrist injury, and we can't be sure exactly like how much of swing changes are caused by these things. But when I think about Spieth, and a question I would have is like, I wonder if in 2017 he felt the need to change because he looked at some young players and said, wow, like I need to get better at XYZ. And I think this is like the hard thing at being at the top of the game. We saw Tiger Woods undergo, Tiger Woods like threw away years undergoing swing changes. And it's always wild to me. It's like you're the best player in the world. And this is something I'm fascinated about with Scottie Scheffler is like he seems just dedicated to what he does. And there seems to be no appetite for changing anything. He's like the most boring creature of habit. And that's perhaps the best way to keep playing high level golf. But Spieth and Cameron McCormick, they seem like they're restless. And I think like this is part of what people like about Spieth and what the magnetism of Spieth is. Like you watch him play and the microphone's on him and Greller, and there's like this restlessness to him. But that restlessness comes through with what he's done with his golf swing. And he went from being this great tee to green player. He was a very good tee to green player. And now he is not a great tee to green player, but he's a lot faster. And I found this thing, this Brandel clip from 2023.
I watched this.
He called, this is what he said about Spieth swing changes. One of the more baffling things I've seen in 20 plus years sitting in this chair. He then went and he did a detailed swing breakdown. I'd recommend everybody watch it. It's talked
really good.
Really good. Brandel throwing heat here. And he says, when you look at the swing, you say, it's kind of the same, but it's not. Those little differences have changed his DNA. In 2015, he was riding the bullet train to one of the best players of all time. Now he's still a good player, but nowhere near as good of a player. He's not in the same league as he was in 2015. And I think like the hardest thing about golf is it's an imperfectible game. And you feel even when you're the best player in the world, you feel the pressure to perfect this game. And that pressure to perfect the game leads great players to make irrational decisions about how they play the game. And I think like when I distill down Jordan Spieth's career, that's kind of what I see is like the tinkering is what led to him losing his special sauce.
Yeah, and I think I don't think he's talked about like all the variables that went into some of those swing changes. Like, oh, well, I saw these other guys getting faster, or I thought this was more repeatable, or there's a million reasons to make swing changes, and the Brandel video it's really fascinating, like talking about how he's more shut than he used to be, and how, I mean, if you look at the numbers, like he was a better driver in 2024 than he's been in a long time.
Yeah.
Right. And I think what's weird and what we don't know, and maybe what 2025 will tell us, is his approach play has gotten so bad and so mediocre. Like that the thing for me with Spieth, people talk about the putter and like, some of the stats that Joseph mentioned there. He was the best iron player in the world, and it wasn't really that close in 2017. I thought that was like the most repeatable version of Spieth, where it's like, okay, this is a sticky stat. Like you're the best iron player, more so than like chipping in and making 30 footers and whatever. And that's the thing that is just consistently since 2017 fallen off. And now he's like a bad iron player. Now you look at it and you're like, okay, how much of that? I remember 2017, he wins Pebble And there was another top 10 player that was like, this is problematic because it's not him making 20 footers. It's him hitting it to 10 feet every time or 15 feet every time. And that is like, he's gotten really good at that. And that's a problem because if he's doing that, he's going to make some of those 15 footers inevitably. And you just wonder how much of the wrist was, he's blamed it on the wrist some in 2024, but I wonder how much of the wrist was playing into his inability to hit some of those iron shots that he used to hit.
One thing I think we to zero in on a little bit on this timeline, I feel very strongly and confident that Spieth's like iron play and some of those issues are not tied to the pursuit of speed. Jordan's game drops off a lot in 2018 and then really bottoms out in 2019. And that's not a period where Jordan's trying to pick up a bunch of speed. That's where I believe, and having talked to some people who are somewhat close to Jordan, like that's when I think they really tried to figure out what was going wrong versus Jordan thinking that speed was the difference between him winning and not, chasing speed and then losing some of the iron play. I don't think that's really how the timeline went. So I would throw the challenge flag on that a little bit.
It's one of the things I think with Spieth is he's kind of like, for golfers, like I think the first modern golfer, and I talked about how he was on the front edge of the youth movement that we've seen over the last decade on the PGA Tour, but he also was like the first player on the kind of press handling. And I think that makes it hard because we've never, it's always been like this pre-arranged appearance thing. And he talks before, tournament rounds, but I think like Rory, like in his early career had a little bit more of that traditional golf media where it was like sit down interviews. He's done these Kimmage interviews forever and it's kind of part of his thing. Like the Spieth thing is like sponsor shoots, predetermined press, handlings and like, with, I don't want to say oversight, but like, it is, I just think he's like he's the first golfer we've seen in this modern era of media where it's really like cultivated. And part of that is like, it leaves when the careers don't go exactly the way you expect, it leaves a lot of questions that probably won't get answered until he's done playing, until when he's done and he reflects back to and says like the tell all of this is really what happened, and it's a fascinating aspect of his career. And I think it's one of the things that makes him so compelling at this point is he's 31. Theoretically, he should have years and opportunities to win major championships ahead of him. The driving is so like encouraging from last year. And as you guys said, like the iron play from years ago, that's the thing. If he just remained a great iron player, he wouldn't have fallen. He'd still be making national teams like the Ryder Cup and President's Cup on merit. Like there are tons of streaky putters on that are in the top 15 of the world. It's just that it feels like he's lost the fabric of who he is. All right, let's take a quick break and talk about our partner, True Golf, and their launch box. This could be a good thing for Jordan Spieth to use at home. It's an all new portable launch monitor and golf simulator. Now that his wrist's feeling better, I hope he has a launch box in his basement. I'm sure he does. Launch box seamlessly connects to your PC or iOS device, and it makes it easy to play golf courses or improve your game year round. You could do all kinds of things. You could go to the range. You could do like wedge competitions. You can play golf. Couple of things that Launchbox offers. It's simple to set up, instant shot recognition, accurate measured data, and an easy Wi-Fi connection. Launchbox is optimized for indoor use, and it can be used outside off of range mats. And, this is just a great thing for the winter. It is the time of year that you want this. You could set something up in your garage. You could set something up in your basement, or you could set something up outside. If you want to learn more about Launchbox, visit truegolf.com/egg. That's trugolf.com/egg. So I think this is a good time and to kind of run through the timeline of his career. When was the first time you guys heard about Jordan Spieth?
Kyle, I mean, mine was whenever he made his first. What was the first professional start that he made as an amateur?
The Byron Nelson.
Yeah, I believe that's when I heard about him for the first time.
He was tied for 7th after the 3rd round in that. Finished 16th. What about you, Kyle?
Which I think was his best finish at the Byron Nelson. I think it might still be his best finish at the Byron Nelson.
He was 16.
Now that he's at Craig Ranch, that's a Spieth stopper.
That was my first time also, because I had just moved to Dallas. I moved to Dallas in 2010. So what year was that?
That would have been 2010.
Okay. So yeah, it was like a big thing here.
Maybe that's why he blew up, was because you moved to the area.
For sure. I would not be in golf for another 2 years, but that was definitely the reason.
All right. Let's provide like a little bit of context of his just, I kind of like forgot when I started to do this, like just running through the timeline, just how insane the early career was. And I know how insane it was, but when you like dig into it, you're just like, this is nuts. So he won the US Junior twice. He's the only player to do that, to win multiple US Juniors other than Tiger, who obviously won 3 times. He was number 1 in the AJGA rankings as a junior. So prolific junior golfer. Like we talked about, played in the Byron Nelson in 2010, finished 16th. Then he also made the cut again in 2011. So when he was 16 and 17, he's making PGA Tour cuts, finished 32nd. He went to Texas. He played one year at Texas. And he played on that 2011 Walker Cup team. So as a freshman at Texas, he won 3 events. He had the low scoring average as a freshman. The team won the national championship. He was all Big 12 Freshman of the Year, Player of the Year, and First Team All-American. 2012. So he's still a freshman. He's the low am at the U.S. Open. I mean, he's just piling up like every consequential accomplishment that you can have as an amateur. Then when Patrick Cantlay turned professional, he became the number 1 amateur in the world in the WAGR, the amateur golf rankings. So at this point, he decides to turn professional. And it was actually I think one of the things with modern golf now in PGA Tour U, and I think this is one of the, I think it's good that kids are staying in school. But I do think like Spieth is actually an example of why PGA Tour U could be not great. He turned pro after missing Q school. And if he doesn't turn pro until his senior year, do we miss the best Spieth years of his career?
Yeah, I think it's interesting to think about, because he had that, I think Sean Martin wrote about this, but he had that decision on KFT where should he go to the Puerto Rico event? Should he stay playing KFT? They were going to like Colombia or somewhere like that.
Yeah.
And he goes to Puerto Rico and finishes 2nd, and then goes on to get his card, I believe, at Valspar, and then wins John Deere. Mm-hmm. And it just accelerates this timeline. And I think, one of the things we get so excited about in any sport, Andy, is how good are you at the youngest age possible, whether it's basketball, football. It's a little different because they have restrictions on when you can enter the league or whatever, but basketball, this is like a huge baseball thing, like Juan Soto when he was 16 or whatever. And so I do think, like, I think net PGA Tour U is a net win, but I do think it kind of prohibits your your Tom Kim type from getting out there and figuring out like, okay, this is who this guy could be as a professional.
Yeah, I mean, I think like you're taking a huge risk if you if you know you're really good. It's like, okay, like this is a guaranteed way for me to get a card. It is like it's an interesting moment because like, you know, you see these guys like Ludwig. I especially researching this, you think about like Ludwig who gets his card at 23 and he's been great. Think about what Jordan Spieth had done before he turned 23. Akshay. Yeah, Akshay's, you know, he would be a senior now, but instead he's won twice on the PGA Tour. And probably, right, if you pick the Ryder Cups teams right now, he's a fringe Ryder Cupper, right?
Yeah.
Like, so it's just an interesting thing. So he doesn't make it through Q School. We talked about this. He falls at Craig Ranch. But he still turns pro, and it's midway through his sophomore year at Texas. He leaves the Longhorns.
I'm sorry. I can't wait until the Spieth documentary comes out and we get 10 minutes of Andy talking TPC Craig Ranch and how it was like Spieth's ultimate downfall. That's going to be incredible.
He missed by 3. He finished 8 under, tied for 26. Brooks and him both finished 8 under. It's wild. I mean, like talk about like so Brooks goes to Europe.
Challenge Tour, baby.
Yeah. And that's how he takes this. And Spieth goes, I'm just going to take sponsors exemptions. Because at this point, I mean, he's the golden boy. Brooks wasn't going to get sponsors exemptions, right? I think like it's actually like a fascinating Brooks, Spieth, like this moment in time and like two completely different profile players. And now when you look at their major careers, their resumes, it's like very similar. They got their completely roundabout ways. It's a great story. There's a PGA Tour article that's you know not super in depth, but it's a thought provoking article just because of where they are right now. So, anyways, as Kyle illuminated, he goes to Puerto Rico. Valspar gets conditional status, like special temporary status, and then John Deere, he wins the playoff, famous shot that hits the flag and goes in. There's a sliding doors of like, what if that doesn't go in?
It kind of goes in the water, I think, if it doesn't go in.
It's just it's a very, very. So then he goes to the President's Cup, and then you know you go into the next year, and it's just this is where it starts to go, right? He finished 11th at the FedEx Cup after getting his card with no status, which is wild. Got him into the majors. And by the end of 2013, he goes from no status to the 22nd ranked player in the world. I think like when Spieth mania like kind of starts to take off, it's the Masters. 2014, he shares the 54-hole lead with Bubba Watson and finishes second. He's the youngest runner-up in Masters history, and he's now into the top 10 in the world golf rankings.
He's 20.
And that Saturday night, you're like, I think he's going to win the Masters. Like that's how solidly he had been playing. It wasn't like, oh, this guy like shot up third round 65 and jumped. It was like, I think he's going to win.
And I think the Masters and Spieth is at this time, he is just the perfect Masters player where enough distance to get over the hills, enough distance to take advantage of the par fives, really good iron player, exceptional short game player. So you can miss, you can avoid taking on some risks and know you can get up and down. And then at this time also, he's a great putter.
I was going to say specifically he's always kind of had short range putting issues, but unbelievable from outside of 10 feet, where if you're hitting a lot of smart approach shots to 25 feet at Augusta, like he's giving these putts a run over and over again. So yeah, I agree with you, Andy. Pretty much the ideal Augusta player.
So you spoke about the short range putting issues. That was the issue at Craig Ranch when he missed Q School. The quote is, so I remember hitting like 65 of 72 greens. Maybe not the hardest thing to do out there now that we've seen it a couple of years on tour. And I just couldn't putt it in the ocean. And then I worked a lot on my putting that off season. And then I started to really make some and have good finishes the next spring. And it got me status and running on the PGA Tour. Like something that just popped into my head when I read that is like, did we just get like a supernova hot streak for 3 years on the putting green?
I mean, I would say no, because what's bizarre about Spieth's putting is he's always been bad from short range, even including during that stretch. He wasn't great. He has one good year from 3 to 5 feet, and that's in 2016. Other than that, he's always been basically outside the top 100. Where I think we get a pretty hot putting streak is that 15 to 25 foot range when he's making them 5% more often than anybody else in the world. So, but he's even been able to kind of maintain that over a decent period of time. So I agree. Yeah, to an extent, hot putting, but it's more just a weird dichotomy between the short range putting and the long range putting. It's really bizarre. And I don't think we've seen that with any other player, at least in the last 10 to 15 years.
I think that quote kind of, and this goes back to your point, Joseph, that quote kind of ties, like, it gives you a little bit of a lens into Spieth. This is his really probably first failure as a golfer. And if you look at that, then I worked a lot on my putting that offseason. So like, is that what happens? Is like when he feels threatened, he just goes to work on his weakness. And maybe that's where the swing change stuff with the iron play happen. Like the iron play slips and like alarm bells off. I need to work on my iron play.
Yeah. I mean, I want to know, like, I am desperate to know more about the swing changes, the iron play, all of that, because even, I mean, I remember 2014, 15 at the Masters, he led after like 7 of the 8 rounds that were played, something like that. Or maybe it was 15, 16. I mean, he led after almost every round. And it was because, yeah, it was the long range putting, but he was also knocking down. I mean, he was like ripping at flag sticks all over the place. Like his iron play was unbelievable. His driving has always been like, yeah, okay. Like if he gets hot, like it can be repeatable. But I always go back to the iron play. Some of this is just pushing back against like this Spieth narrative of, oh, he made every 30 footer he looked at. It's like, no, he didn't. He was an amazing iron player. And he made, like Joseph said, like he was really good from 15 to 25 feet. But yeah, I constantly go back to the iron play and wanting to know like why that's so different now than it was back in 14, 15, 16, 17.
I think when you have to think about like how everything interacts with a player. I think like that's like an important thing to think about is like, how does every part of your game relate to the other part of the game? And when you think about Spieth, the little bit crooked driver was fine. And why it was fine was because of the short game. Like you can afford to be a little bit crooked off the tee if you're really great around the greens. We see this with like Cam Smith is a great example of this, where like you can afford to have a little bit of a crooked driver when you're a magician around the greens. And Spieth was that. Like the key though to that, and what Cam Smith, for example, has, and maybe it's not as prolific as when he was maybe the best player in the world. Like what Spieth had and Cam Smith had, magical short game, great iron play, and solid putting. Like can get really hot. And Cam, I think that's a disservice, one of the best putters in the world. But like you think about how those interplay, right? You can't be a crooked driver and have a bad short game, because that's going to lead to like a lot of bogeys. So that iron play was fine. Like, you know, you think about like the fabric of the player, and that whole picture works. And I think like what happens is people get too maniacally focused on like fixing what's bad and lose sight of like, okay, how does everything relate with me?
Well, and think about the places where Cam Smith and Spieth have had a lot of success.
Augusta, Open Championships.
Yeah, they're places.
Chambers Bay. I was going to say that was an interesting one to see Cam Smith right in the. I think Cam Smith, Patrick Reed, and Jordan Spieth are always going to kind of show up together,
because those are places where you can miss and hit recovery shots that are either put you in position to score or to say, and you know, like is Spieth ever going to win a modern PGA? I don't know. Like, it doesn't seem like it, you know. I just think, and we can get to that later on, but I think it's interesting to look at what you're talking about, Andy, which is like, how does your skill set fit with, not only how does it play, but how does it fit together when you're playing some of these major championships and big events? And there are certain courses that it fits together way better than some other courses.
I mean, like for example, if you compare him to Jason Day at this peak time, when Jason Day's and him are the two best players in the world, Jason Day is a great driver of the golf ball, great around the greens, great putter, pretty mediocre iron player.
Yeah.
But like you think about like, how does that relate, right? Well, he puts himself into position where he's going to hit enough approaches that he's going to hit good ones that generate birdies. But is iron play his forte? No. Spieth, meanwhile, is the complete opposite, where he's not going to put himself in as many great positions to approach the green as Day, but he's going to convert on more, right? It's just like a fascinating thing. And Day's short game bails out mediocre approach play. Day's short game and putting. Like, when you start, like, that's, I think, like what gets missed sometimes with like the really data-driven analysis is sometimes you miss like how these things, like, it just becomes like, look at how bad this person is at this. And It's like, well, like all these other things work together to mask that, right?
I think especially zeroing in on the relationship between approach play and around the greens. And when you're very good in both, like Spieth is, or what Spieth was, almost every hole presents an interesting. Okay, if you hit a good drive, then you're probably you have a good chance of hitting it close. If you don't, you have a good chance of getting up and down. Like one example I think is always important to throw out is if you hit the green, your strokes gained around the green is going to be 0. You're not even hitting a chip shot. So Spieth, like, being elite in both of those categories, like you're saying, Andy, it works incredibly well together on a course like Augusta. So
yeah, and if your Day in 2015, it works really well too, because it's like, okay, I'm not the best approach player in the world, but I hit it really far. I hit it relatively straight, and I am going to put myself in a lot of opportunities. And when I don't hit a great approach shot, I'm getting up and down, you know?
But now we have a player in Scottie Scheffler who does everything well, and more players are doing everything well. And even if Spieth hadn't gotten worse, I think he was going to run into this problem eventually.
So I think like a Spieth, this is something that Spieth unlocked at Augusta National, and he might not have been like the first, but like when you think about the 11th hole. And I think this is like, I think about this with Jordan Spieth all the time. And now this is exactly how Scottie Scheffler plays the 11th hole. They just dump it right. There's just no need to even hit the ball anywhere near the water left, because their short games are so good that if you just put them on short grass, right of the green, they're going to get up and down like almost every time. And it's like, this is that interplay, and how like this pairing of iron play and short game works so well at a lot of places. Is like, okay, I'm just gonna dump it. Scheffler talks about it. He aims at like right at the right fringe.
Yeah.
And it's just like, that's where I hit it. and he just hits it right. And then he just gets up and down. And it's just like, okay, I'm taking what we saw happen to Ludwig off the board on Sunday when he hit it in the water this year. You know, it's just like, this isn't going to happen. I'm hitting it over here, and I'm just going to get up and down, and I'm going to walk away with a 4 most days. In 2014, we're going back now. He gets picked for the Ryder Cup. He's the youngest American to play the matches since Horton Smith in 1929.
Obviously.
I mean, it's just like, there's so many of these when you go through his bio. 2015 wins the Masters. He breaks the 36-hole scoring record at 14 under. Broke the 54-hole scoring record at 16 under. Ends up tying the 72-hole scoring record with Tiger. And he became the second youngest to Tiger to win the Masters. First wire-to-wire winner since Ray Floyd. That was such a dominant performance. It only gets better. 2015 wins the U.S. Open. He beats DJ and Louis Oosthuizen at Chambers Bay. Became the 6th player ever to win the Masters of the U.S. Open in the same year. First since Tiger Woods. Youngest winner of the U.S. Open since Bobby Jones.
Youngest to win 2 career majors since Gene Sarazen, I think it said. I was watching this broadcast back. So yeah, 6th player ever to win the Masters and the U.S. Open in the same year. And that's another one of those great what ifs, Andy, that the Dustin Johnson 3-putt on 18, that a lot changes if he makes that putt or if it goes to a playoff. Like, that's one of the Spieth, I think, probably one of the biggest what ifs.
Well, and the way it finished, right, where he birdies 16 next to the train, doubles 17. And you're like, I mean, it's kind of the epitome of the Spieth roller coaster. And then I believe he birdied
18. Yeah.
To eventually to end up winning it. That was actually the first major I covered in person. And I remember it was when the US Open was still 18-hole, the Monday 18-hole playoff. And I remember I was like so excited to be out there. I was like, oh yeah, I'll go 18 holes with these guys. That'd be a blast. And all these other people that were in the media center were just so excited that DJ missed the putt so that they didn't have to stay and cover it on Monday. And I was bummed. I was like, oh, I want to watch another 18 holes with these guys. That'd be amazing.
Do you think the USGA, if that happens, gets rid of the 18-hole playoff?
Probably.
If they play 18 on Monday?
And then you could have had this like epic duel.
Yeah.
Maybe it's still in existence.
Yeah, that's a good point.
There's a Cameron McCormick quote after Chambers that I thought was interesting. So this is from Karen Krause's New York Times piece. Cameron McCormick, who has worked with Spieth for nearly a decade, said Spieth's ability to perform in the clutch could be traced to his, quote, bulletproof self-image. No matter what happened previously, he can will the outcome to his desire. That makes me think of the Harrington quote, the Padraig Harrington quote, where it's experience, paraphrasing here, it's not exactly this, but experience isn't everything is cracked up to be. With experience, you gain scar tissue.
Yeah.
Was what it was. And I think that's like an interesting aspect of golf. In my long ago competitive career, I had some trouble playing tournaments at my home course, which is so counterintuitive. You think it was easy, like, you know, the course. But what I found was in tournament pressure, I would think about all of the times that I struggled on the course and where not to hit it. And I think, like, at this point in Spieth's career, he's never had any, like, his one moment of bother was the Q school thing. He's just been on this ascendant trajectory. And I wonder if, like, part of this also mentally, he's lost that bulletproof self-image. He's realized, especially at this point in his career, that there are players that are better than him. So what you're saying, Joseph?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's multiple things in one. Like the swing gets worse. He's hitting the ball worse, and he's the 12th hole at Augusta. You have to bring it up, right? Like, you want to talk about scar tissue. I don't think any golfer has as much scar tissue on one specific hole as Spieth does on 12 at Augusta. He's hit it in the water there a bunch of times now. So I think there could be something to that, but also he's just not hitting the ball as well.
Yeah, I think one thing with this, Andy, is when you have somebody like that who has been generationally good at every age, it gets very difficult for that person to start to make these decisions out of humility. And so what I think Scottie Scheffler's superpower is his humility. He is willing to say, hey, I can hit this shot probably 7 out of 10 times, but because I can't hit it 3 out of 10 times, I'm not gonna take it on. I'm gonna lay up over here. I'm gonna hit over here away from trouble. I'm not gonna short side myself. And I think so often Spieth, whether it's because he wants to prove it to himself or prove it to other people, or because he's just done it for so long, I think he has a hard time making smart choices on the golf course. And yes, you can obviously, like, he's lost something with his tee to green game. And so you combine those two things and it results in a lot of like disastrous holes or disastrous 9-hole stretches over the course of the last, since over the last 7 years. And I do wonder if that is rooted in the fact that he won the US Junior twice. He won the Masters. I mean, all these things, first since Tiger, first since 1919,
Yeah.
It's been 100 years. And you start to think like, oh, I like, it's hard because you want to have that self-confidence and that self-belief, but you also have to pair it with like a wisdom and a humility on the golf course to not take things on that you shouldn't, and to hit places that you're like, that's boring, I don't want to do that. But the best players, I mean, that's what Scottie Scheffler is doing over and over again. And that's why that's part of the reason he's the best player in the world.
I mean, Kyle, I think it's very smart to draw the comparison with Scheffler. And I think, like you're saying, Scottie's mind is, okay, I can do this 7, 8 times out of 10, but what happens when it goes wrong? And Spieth is very stubborn in like, I see this shot, I don't care what happens when it goes wrong. Like, I can get myself out of it. I'm hitting it, but it doesn't really work out that way for you in the long run if you keep making those mistakes.
I do think also at this time in his career, 2014, 15, 16, Spieth emanated a maturity paired with an innocence of youth. And that's an unusual thing. You get guys that are 19, 20, 21, they're usually pretty immature. And I think some of that is rooted in his upbringing, his family life, his sister having special needs and her getting the lion's share of the attention within their family as he was growing up. He had to and I guess what I'm getting at is there was this perfect balance of like personal maturity, but also like innocence within golf and not having that scar tissue that I think really worked to his advantage as a 21-year-old that not a lot of guys have. And obviously when we talk about these things, there's like a million factors. There's a million variables. We're just sort of calling out the ones that are most prominent or that we see most prominently that I think played into some level of like generational success at that age. And that's one that it gets talked about in terms of like, oh, Spieth's a good guy, or like he's always like his family has shaped him or whatever. But I think, not to make it too much about golf, I think it's really helped him it helped him at that age as a golfer as well, because he had a maturity that, the Padre quote, maybe sometimes you lack a little bit of that maturity at 2021, and he had it, and it paired perfectly with where his talent and where his kind of innocence as a golfer was at as well.
Yeah. I think you're hitting on what makes golf superstars so fascinating. I think when you talk about a lot of other sports, most other sports are reactionary.
Mm-hmm.
Your background, your upbringing can shape how you approach the preparation for the game. But then you get in the arena and it is very much a reactionary, skill-driven, athleticism-driven sport. With golf, the interplay of mental state and performance, I think, is more correlated than any other sport in the world. The one that would jump to mind is like pitching in baseball. I think is like probably the closest comp to golf, where you have like that interplay of mental, like you have to think before every pitch. And I think like that's the fascinating thing with Jordan Spieth, especially because of the uniqueness of his personality that we see come out in the conversations with Michael Greller. So he closes out 2015, T4 at the Open, one shot out of the three-way playoff. Second at the PGA to Jason Day. Absolutely, I think like one of the best tournaments that nobody talks about was that duel.
It was a mini version of Phil Stinson.
Yes.
The 15 Open, the 70th hole, he makes that long birdie. So 16, he makes that long. I mean, it was a bomb, and you're like, this guy's he's going to win the Grand Slam. Like, it legitimately felt like he was going to win the Grand Slam at that moment. I think he bogeyed the road hole, and then he hits a ball. It looked like it was headed for the first tee box on 18. I mean, it was so left. It was unbelievable. And he still has a chance to tie and get into the playoff. But I just think taking, he took the Grand Slam to the 213th hole or whatever of the year. That's extraordinary. Like, that's not going to happen very often in a golf year. And that was it was a really special year. Like, it was just so much fun to cover that and to be like, just to witness it, to experience it. It felt very, very unique and like something that we're probably not going to see very, very many more times.
I was wondering, like, legitimately, do you think anybody is going to be this close ever again?
Well, you've got, now the order of the majors is different, right? So in terms of like, I think it's probably less rare to win the Masters and the PGA in the same year. I'd have to look that up off the top of my head. I can't remember. So I do think somebody could take it to the US Open, but
then that far into the US Open,
he lost to 4 guys that year at the majors?
4 guys. Like, legitimate back nine, as you said, I mean, he bogeys the road hole and doesn't birdie 18 at St. Andrews. Like, usually that's a, par 4.5, par 3.5.
Yeah.
And he doesn't get that done. And then the day thing, they're going back and forth all Sunday.
Yeah, no, I don't think anybody will get that close. I mean, what's my time frame? Like, ever again?
I mean, in the next, in your lifetime covering the sport. So we'll say 30 more years, 20, 25 more, 20 years, 25 years.
I mean, Joseph's got like 40 years left, but no, I do not think that anybody will get that close again.
I'll say somebody wins the first 2 and is in the mix at a third in the next 30 to 40 years, but I think there's almost no chance that they do it at that age. That they do it when they are 21 years old. That's not happening.
Well, that's where, like, and maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I've really struggled for a comp with Spieth over the course of his career. And the one that I've finally landed on that I think I'm going with is Seve. Right? Because it was the age thing.
Yeah.
It's the Masters and Open Championship thing. It's the sort of like the sum of the parts, or I always mess this up. The sum is greater than what am I trying to say, Joseph?
You got it.
Yeah. The sum is greater than all the parts, right?
Exactly. Like, you don't look at, and Joseph and I talked about this several years ago. I think we were talking about Scheffler, but he was like, Joseph said to me, I always trust guys that it doesn't look great necessarily, because it means that they have done it. Like, they have, like, because guys, you look at them and it looks great. Like, Gordon Sargent gets the benefit of the doubt at every
Cam
level.
Davis.
Yeah. because you're like, it looks amazing. And guys where it doesn't look great, you're like, this guy has probably not gotten the benefit of the doubt. He's had to actually do the work and actually accomplish what's in front of him. And you just trust it more. And that's where with Spieth, it was like, he was like, he was so good at scoring, at winning. And I don't understand how that part, I don't think it has gone away. And I think he could win more major. I think he will win another major at some point. But yeah, it just is crazy that it has like dissipated this quickly.
Yeah. All right. We ready to move on from 2015?
Yeah.
2016 Masters collapse. I don't think we need to really go into this that much. How many? Do you have a 6-shot lead at the turn?
5 at the turn.
5 at the turn. Obviously, the 12th hole is one of the most memorable scenes in Masters history. And Danny Willett wins. And then there's real talk about, like, can he come back from this? Is it possible for him to come back from this? Because it was such a, historic collapse. There were a lot of Greg Norman comps. I think the one that resonates the most with me is maybe Curtis Strange, when he turned with he opened the Masters with a 40 on the front nine, but he turned on the back nine with a 5-shot lead or a 4-shot lead and lost. Just fell apart. But he quickly wins the Dean and DeLuca. Remember that sponsor?
Of course.
The Dean, I love that. The Dean and DeLuca that year. He has a good 2016. 2017 is the next really good year. Won the AT&T. It was his 100th start. He's the second man, along with Tiger Woods, to win 9 times before the age of 24. Keep in mind, like, Rahm, this is where this goes back to the PGA Tour U thing. Rahm, like, Ludwig's, I think, 25.
Yeah.
At age 24, when Ludwig's like playing his first year on tour, Spieth had won 9 times and won 2 majors. Finished runner-up in 2 Masters. Like, wild.
Yeah. It was crazy. Especially when you pair it with all the stuff he did in junior golf too, right? Like, he got a year of college. He hit the check mark of every apex that he could possibly hit.
He was contended in 6 majors by now. Like, he could have he was within striking distance of 6 major championships.
I think, Kyle, your Seve comp is like, I always think about Seve and Spieth, and it's like sometimes with golf, your best golf comes when you're 18, 19 years old, 17. Mm-hmm. Everybody always says Seve's best golf was when he was like 16. It's the unique thing about golf, right? Yeah. Where, like, the physicality in most sports is centers around, like, when you reach your physical prime. Like the NBA, it's 27, 28. Yeah. NFL, it's getting younger, but it's, very speed and strength driven. Mm-hmm. With golf, like that basic level of man strength isn't necessarily a prerequisite. So you get these players that play their best golf at a young age.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing about that, Andy, and you have turned me on to this idea over the years of just like the idea that it's very, very difficult to remain at a major winning level for a long time, right? Like what DJ and Rory have done to at least be at that level, even if they haven't won majors for like a longer than 5-year window, is very unusual. And if you look back, I tweeted this out. I was looking this morning at like what's guys' major winning span. And it has this you can go look at it on Wikipedia. And so like Arnold Palmer, 6 years. Tom Watson's like 6 years. Tom Watson won 8 majors. He did it in like 6 years. Mm-hmm. I think Hogan won like 9. He did it in 7 years. I mean, it's very, very unusual to extend that beyond 8, 10, 12 years. It just doesn't happen very often. Seve, I think, won his 5 in a 9-year span. And I do wonder if we'll look back on Spieth and say, well, I mean, he won all of his majors between 2015 and 2017. And that's just what it was.
I mean, Duvall had like a similar hot burn, at an older age. Right?
Yeah.
Where it was like basically 2-3 years, and then he wasn't the best player in the world.
That's why like Ernie and Phil doing what they've done has been, I mean, Ernie was 18 years, I think 1994 to 2012. Phil was 17 years, 2004 to 2021. That's crazy. Like that does not happen. Obviously, Tiger 97 to 2019, 22 years. That's very, very unusual. Nicholas was a long time, but it just doesn't happen very often. And I do wonder if we'll look back and say, like, I always thought Spieth would get it back. But we're only saying that because we're kind of in the middle. Like we're kind of growing up in our jobs with Spieth. And he was like the guy that made us excited about writing and podcasting and covering golf. But if somebody in the future is like, yeah, of course, like that's just how long you win majors for. Like it would have been weirder if he did win a major at 34 than if he didn't. Like that's just kind of how professional golf is.
Kyle, completely. And can I give you kind of a bad stat on that? This was the one that's probably the least optimistic for Spieth, but while we're here. So Jordan Spieth's finished in the top 10 4 times since 2021, but a lot of those were not super competitive, like had a low final round or like gained a bunch of strokes and putting on the last day or something. It wasn't really in the mix. Okay. Jordan Spieth has been within 3 of the lead in 10 major championships in his career. 9 of those were between 2015 and 2018. The 10th was in 2021 at Royal St. George's. Since the start of 2022, Jordan has not been within 7 shots of the lead after 3 days of a major, or 7 is the closest he's been. So we're going on 3 full years now of not being anywhere remotely in the mix at a major. It reinforces what you're saying about that window, but that's kind of a tough, like not even being within 7.
Oh, this is why we're having this discussion today, is that it feels like with the wrist, we're at this crossroads.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree. I looked up since he won that 2017 Open, Joseph Birkdale, most top 10s at majors since then. So August 1st, 2017. Rory's got 15, Xander's got 14, Rahm has 13, Scottie and Brooks have 12, DJ and Finau have 10, Morikawa has 9, Cam Smith has 8. Keep going down the list. Zalatoris, Reed, Fleetwood, Bryson, JT, and Spieth all have 7. So he is not, I mean, he's like kind of like relevant, but it's not within, there's 10 guys ahead of him in terms of like competitiveness at majors. And what you're saying makes it even worse, which is that, yeah, those are like top 10s, but it's like, I think he finished top 10 at St. Andrews in 2022.
He did.
Was he
T8 uncompetitive?
Was he involved ever?
No.
Well, yeah, I had a stat, 7 top 5s in his first 18 starts as a pro in majors. That has 3 wins in there.
Yeah.
Since then, he's 5 of 28 for top 5. One of those top 5s was the Bethpage one, where he had, I think it was like the most strokes gained putting of any major performance ever, but he was still like 8 or 9 back. It was a third of Brooks and DJ.
I followed him that Saturday at Bethpage. It was him and Brooks were in the final pairing, and they looked like they were playing different sports. It was like, I don't think Spieth found the center of the club face. It was unbelievable. It was unreal that he finished in the top 5 that week.
So I think this is like the thing too, is like that illustrates how you could have a hot putter. Like maybe the putting was unsustainable of his early career. It was, but it doesn't mean it wasn't sustainable for weeks and spurts. And I think that the Bethpage setup just in general was never going to fancy Spieth, no. Right? I mean, I remember podcasting with Jeff Ogilvie in our preview, and Jeff was just like, listen, if you don't carry it 300 yards or 310 yards, you have no chance this week. It is going to be someone who is at far and high, and it just played out exactly that way. But I think so he wins the Open. We talked about that in pretty detail at the start. I just wanted to put the stat out there. So he wins the 2017 Open. He beats Kuchar by 3. He has that incredible finish, as you guys highlighted. He's the second player in the history of golf since Jack Nicklaus at this point to win 3 of the first 4 majors before 24.
It's crazy. I almost feel like we underrated what he was doing.
Right, like I looked back at this and I'm like, God, like there were Tiger comparisons, doing it in a completely different way than Tiger, but like we had never seen anything like this in this generation.
Yeah, and it was on the heels, Andy, of that weird like Luke Donald, Lee Westwood, Martin Keimer, like that whole deal at the beginning of the 2010s. And obviously you had Rory kind of emerge from that, but
this is like made us forget about Rory.
Yeah, this was kind of the first, I'm going to probably regret saying this, but in my mind, off the top of my head, this was the first American, like young American, that it was like, okay, this is, this could be amazing. Like in the post-Tiger scandal, knee injury, all that. So obviously, Tiger was amazing in 2013, but in terms of young Americans, I think he was kind of the first guy to emerge out of that era.
Yeah. Wow, you hate it. You hate Anthony Kim.
I already regret it. See, I told you I would.
The three-time winner, Anthony Kim. Ricky,
I guess would be the other.
Yeah, Ricky had maybe this much buzz, but not quite the accomplishments.
Spieth never won a Players.
I think something that sticks with me, a media executive told me this, a broadcast media executive. He said, there are 2 players other than Tiger that move the needle for ratings, Jordan Spieth and Rory McIlroy, and that's it.
Yeah.
Nobody else matters. No one else matters. And when you like look back at ratings, so we're doing a year in review on the Shotgun Start, and it's so true. Yeah. It's like the only thing that moved the ratings numbers last year on the PGA Tour was Rory McIlroy. Jordan Spieth didn't have any moments that moved the ratings, But this guy's like, there are 2 players other than Tiger, and that's it, that move ratings.
I forget exactly what I was watching. I think it was some random PGA Tour live event, and the commentator was basically, he's involved with junior golf in some way, and he said if you ask junior golfers who their favorite player is, like half, 60-70% of them say Jordan Spieth. And it'd be really interesting to see that over time now, and if we're still there, if that's shifting a little bit to somebody like Bryson. But I think Jordan Spieth's grip hold over people who are currently like 15, like he's a lot of those golfers' favorite player.
Well, and this is something that I've grappled with my entire career, because my career has basically coincided with the Rory, honestly, more so with the Spieth era, but most of Rory's as well. Is what is it about Spieth? Like he's just this kind of, I think Porath called him a milquetoast white guy, just normal looking guy from Dallas, Texas, who's good at golf. And I think part of it, Andy, is like what you're just saying of like winning at that age is so unique and unusual. But I think another part of it is like, and we've talked about this a bunch probably on Twitter or other podcasts, is just the idea of like, he reminds you of yourself at times when he's playing, because you're like,
yes,
this is, I mean, like, I think I can hit that shot legitimately. But like the flip side of that is like some of that is alluring and compelling about his play. Joseph was saying this earlier. Everybody else is kind of caught up to it from a course management and from all these other perspectives. So I don't know if that formula necessarily works anymore, but he definitely hit at a time where people were looking for somebody to love and to kind of latch onto in the golf world.
Yeah. So after Birkdale, I don't want this to sound harsh.
Here we go.
Wait, can we guess how many times he's won after Birkdale? Like, just
do you know?
I don't know.
Okay, guess.
I'm gonna say twice.
Correct. I mean,
RBC.
So 2018 Birkdale or 2017 Birkdale, 2 wins since. 2021 Valero,
that's right.
2022 RBC, 2 wins. One a C level PGA Tour event in the Valero, maybe D, probably C.
I thought you meant sea level, like the ocean. I was like, I don't San Antonio.
I'm not sure where it is.
Yeah,
it might be like 1,000 feet. And then RBC, which was a good field.
That was the.
I mean, how many other tournaments has he even been in the mix at?
That's the crazy thing, and it's like he's in the mix on Saturday, and then it's like, oh, he finished 9th, or he shoots 65 on Sunday, and everybody's like, wow, he's back. We're about to see a Spieth run. And I think like at this point, he's kind of that's even gone, where the optimism for the Spieth run is gone. I know this is not like this is not the most, modern stat, but I just found it like jarring. Scoring ranks. So scoring average rank. This starts in 2012. 9th, 14th, 1st, 4th, 1st, 2018 on 18th, 35th, 93rd, 24th, 95th, 30th. And that it didn't have this year's in the Wikipedia on the Wikipedia page. I didn't look it up, but it's just like that one's going to be probably 70th.
Yeah, he only had one top 5 this year, and it was at Kapalua, or in 2024.
Does that even count as a top 5? There's like 50 players in the field. So that leaves us here. What are your thoughts for the future of Jordan Spieth?
Well, I think first of all, one of your all-time great calls was Spieth being just a guy, because that was not obviously a popular opinion at the time, but the numbers.
Lots of people hated on it.
I mean, I was probably among them. But the numbers have borne it out. I mean, I don't remember when you first said it, but it was very smart. I think
it was like 2019.
Yeah. So you had a little bit of data, but look, I think that 2025 and 2026 will be very telling for what we get the rest of Spieth's career. But here's my opinion is like, you can exist as a 1 to 1.5 strokes gain per round guy, which is like a top, help me out, Joseph, 25 to 40 type guy.
It's a little different with the way the game's structured now, but sure.
And still go out and win a major or two. I think I looked up since January 1, 2014. Now I know we're taking it back to when he was like uber competitive at the beginning of his career. So when his major career started, most top 10s at the Open and Masters, like if you only look at those 2 majors, the Open Championship and Augusta, Rory has 13, Spieth has 11. Nobody else has more than 8. Jon Rahm has 8. So I think he will definitely contend at one of those and potentially win one. But I don't think we're getting 2015 or 2017 Spieth ever again in terms of a week in, week out top 10 type guy. Like, I just don't think that guy is going to exist. But I do still think even if that guy doesn't exist, you can still go win a major championship. You can get hot with the putter for a week, Andy, and be, I mean, it's like Phil, right? Like Phil at Kiowa. You're like, oh, he just remembers like what it's like to win a major when you're in the mix. And I think we get one of those weeks, maybe a couple of those weeks from Jordan Spieth over the next 10 or so years.
Kyle, I know you're not expressing like a ton of optimism, but I even think you're expressing too much optimism personally.
Really?
I do.
Too much optimism?
I think when Jordan Spieth, seeing that he has not been with it closer than 7 shots of the 54-hole lead in the last 3 years, and knowing the typical career arcs, his approach play being bad, plus a firm belief that the way Jordan Spieth won a lot of his majors doesn't work as much now. Like every single one of these majors we've talked about, none of them have been the like clean, mistake free, like maybe the 2015 Masters, but all of these have these wild shots that he then recovers by holing a 25-footer. I don't think that's going to work going forward, and he'd have to improve his iron play a lot. I'll say like small chance that he wins a major again, but I think it's very low. And the chances of 2 majors, like I would be willing to bet a lot of money that does not happen.
I'm gonna go more with Kyle here. I think one of the things and why I think Jordan Spieth will have, it's not same circumstances, but kind of like a Ben Crenshaw type career where there's like one final send off and we get that last major.
We're talking about him like he's like 48.
I think one of the things that I think he loves the game. Yeah. I think he's like hyper competitive. And one of the things that will do I think like there will be a lot of players that would be in his position, with different mentalities and be like, you know what? It was a great run. I think the guy's going to just keep working. He's crazy. I think he's crazy in a great way, like golf crazy.
Yeah.
Where it is going to be a zero. Like he knows what he was and he is now on this quest. Whether he goes to the right places, and I'm kind of in the camp of Brandel, like you completely screwed up your DNA. And you kind of need to piece it back together. You've lost it, but I do believe that there will be a no stone unturned approach to getting back to one he once had, because I think deep down he probably craves that more than anything in his life, to get back to that feeling of I am the best player in the world. I don't think he's ever going to get back to that, but I do think between the Open and the Masters that he will get one more. And it'll be a kind of a blip on the radar. We'll look back and it'll be, there are a lot of these over the history of golf where it's just like, oh, he picked one off late in his career and it makes the career make more sense. It's like really like a lot of guys with 2 majors. It's like, oh, he shouldn't have been a 1 major player. That second major gives him something. With Spieth, it's like he can't end at where he's at now. Like he burned so bright that there is like he should have 4, right? And that's what he's going to get out of it at the end of this career. I think like, can he get back to where he's consistently a top 20 player in the world would be a question. And I think Joseph, you're probably no on that.
I was just going to say the same thing. Can he ever get back to being a top 10 consistent player? For sure, no for me. I think he could push like 18th, but I don't see Jordan Spieth being a top 12 golfer in the world again. I think that's very unlikely.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think he could be, some of the guys in it depends on what we're using as top 20. Is this OWGR? Is it data golf? There's a million different ways to view it. I think like his ceiling right now is like being a top, like the 20th best player in the world consistently over time. You look at some of the guys in the top 20 and you're like, it's not like, rife with like superstars. So I definitely think he can get in there. But in terms of being a top 10 guy, I think I'm with Joseph. I think it would be more concerning in terms of like him winning another major if the way that he won his previous majors was not kind of like he's just a scorer, right? If he did it because he was like a very TrackMan-y, perfect swing, like all these types of things type golfer. And that was gone. You'd be like, that's a very difficult thing to get back. But because at every stage in your career, you've just been a scorer and you've just figured out how to win, I think I can trust that he can figure out how to win one more of those. Do I think he's going to win the career slam? Probably not. Do I think he's going to get to 5 majors? Probably not. But I do think you can figure that out for 1 week, like Phil did, like Ernie Els did. I mean, you were just describing Ernie Els, Andy, where he picks off one at the end of his career. You're like, oh, it makes more sense that he has 4 than he has 3.
Yeah, I think like the most encouraging thing if you're in the Spieth camp is the driving of the golf ball last year. It was a bad year, but if he's a top 20 driver of the golf ball and a top 20 approach player, the thing about Spieth is that you will look at him at the Masters and you will, like, if he can get to that level, he will be a top 5 favorite at the Masters. And, you know, over time, if the stars align and he plays great, he's a hard guy to beat at Augusta National.
We didn't talk about the 64 that could have been a 61 at Augusta.
When he hit the trees.
2018. More likely to win another major, Rory or Spieth?
Rory. Not close.
Rory's got 4 opportunities every year, no matter what. I don't think you could say that Spieth is not going to win Quail Hollow. There's no chance of him winning Quail Hollow.
0.
That's true. He also has 5 years on Rory.
Does he?
I would say that Rory's game has aged way better than Spieth's.
Yeah.
I think Rory's got a longer, like in pure years, he's got less time. But I think of elite play, Rory's got it, depending on how long he wants to play. 6 years.
I mean, but like so much of Rory's is predicated on speed and like how far he hits it and stuff like that. Doesn't that age worse than what Spieth does? Well, I don't know what Spieth does right now, but
I think Rory's got almost a guaranteed 3 to 5 years of 4 attempts a year of cracking a major. So Spieth might not have any more.
Okay. I mean, I think I'm with you guys, but I don't think it's like. I think
I don't think that one's close.
Who do you think ends their career? Who do you think has more top 5s in majors from this point forward, JT or Spieth?
JT.
I'll say Spieth.
I think I'd go JT. So,
who ends their career with more majors, Spieth or Scottie?
Are we serious?
Yeah,
Scottie. Well, that's a great question because I think like you can be a prisoner of the moment.
Yeah.
I mean, if we did this podcast in 2016, we'd be saying the same things about Jordan that we would say right now about Scottie.
Whenever we first got into this, Andy, Rory and Spieth held at the end of 2015, or I guess after the U.S. Open 2015, they held all 4 majors. Right, because Rory won the 14 PGA. Open and PGA, and then Spieth won the 15 Masters and U.S. Open.
I think Spieth +1 would be a pretty good. Spieth at 4, I'd feel differently than Scottie at 2.
Listen, I'm not sold that Scottie's game translates outside of Augusta National.
I'll take Scottie to win at least 4 majors in his careir.
That's like my best Skip Bayless take right there.
For sure. Ricky's too short. This is the whole thing though, right? Is it always seems like obvious.
Except that I'm giving Jordan a very low chance of winning one again. I think a realistic line for Scottie is more than 1 at this point. More than 1 more.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I think that's the thing. I started covering golf in 2015. Obviously a fan, but when you cover it as close as we do, I think the thing you learn with age is how how fleeting major championships are, like how hard it is. It's just,
I agree, but you're not giving Scottie. You don't think the line is at least 1.5 more?
I think I'd put Scottie at 4.5.
Right.
I think
that's putting him past.
Yeah,
Spieth. I think he's at 4. It's a different question.
But I think it's like it's not a foregone conclusion. Like getting to 4 is really freaking hard, and as Spieth, JT, I mean, you go down the list. It's just you never know when the bottom's just going to drop out. And when it's almost like I just like sometimes think like it's like you get in the moments and the ball bounces the wrong way a couple times and it's over.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we're saying with the 6-year window, the 7-year window. It's like, and those are long windows. These are like the best players ever.
Yeah.
Have
just like
windows.
Scottie, if you go, Scottie's window starts at Harding Park, really.
Yeah.
Which was 2021. Right?
I think an interesting one is, does Morikawa ever win another major? Right? Like
much harder one.
You've got all these guys that it just, and I think this is what it's, yeah. I mean, this is what I love about the majors and about the Spieth conversation is it just, you start dishing out you add up. It's like doing NFL win totals at the beginning of the year. You start adding them up. You're like, I don't think the math on this works out. Right. Where there's only 4 of them a year, which is the kind of the beauty of it. And I don't know. It'll be interesting to see which direction Spieth goes.
All right. Any parting thoughts on the Spieth discourse, or are we good to go? I want to give you guys your space. Final word style for PTI. But I think we've an hour and 30 minutes. I think we've kind of hit on everything.
Yeah, I'd just like to publicly apologize for my microphone issues that we had earlier.
I don't think anybody's going to know. That's what PJ's here for.
Well, they're not going to know, but it threw off my rhythm, and it took me a while to get into the flow of the game. So I feel back, pointing at Greller, good to go.
I got nothing else. I think we've been a little pessimistic towards the back end of this, but one of the most electric golfers that we've seen in the 21st century and like the beginning of his career, we may never see again. So I don't want to come across too negatively on Spieth. I would love to see him win again. It just seems like if we will come back to this moment in time in 2025 and look at it 10 years from now and realize like all the signs were there that it was closer to the end than maybe we would have liked to admit.
If he was an LPGA player, we might be talking about he doesn't have enough points to qualify for the Hall of Fame right now.
What a take.
Kyle, what do you got going on with Normal Sport over the next couple weeks, the holidays, and into the new year? I'm a paying member of Normal Sport. I recommend it to everybody. What do you have coming up?
Thank you for saying that, Andy. We actually don't have a ton. We're going to do a bunch this week. I don't know when this is being posted, but
it's being posted tomorrow. So
okay, so this week. But we're going to shut it down after that. We've been, Jason and the team that we have over there has been working really, really hard over the last 3 months since I went full time with it. So we're going to shut it down for the last 2 weeks, and then get cranking again during Kapalua. So we don't have a lot. I would encourage people to go to normalsport.com, become a paying member if you can, if you want to support what we're doing. It's been a ton of fun. You guys have both been helpful and encouraging with it. So I couldn't imagine it being this much fun, but it has been. So it's been great.
I think my one thing, support independent journalism. You are doing your thing. Independence is a great thing, but the best way for you for anybody to remain independent is for people to support your membership, and it goes a long way. And it gives you endless hours of entertainment. I am excited every time the Normal Sporter hits the inbox.
Appreciate that, Andy.
All right, we'll be back later this week. Thank you to PJ for editing, producing this podcast. We'll be back later this week with another pod. I think we're going to try and get 2 more in before Christmas, get you loaded up for the holiday stretch, and maybe we'll drop another Easter egg or two in there over the holidays. But excited for the rest of this year and going into 2025. Thanks for listening, and have a great week.